I just wanted to talk about a different subject today, one that is kind of close to me. I was lucky enough a number of years ago to travel quite extensively in India, and I travelled quite extensively in the south, from Bangalore and all the surrounding areas, all the way down to Kerala and Chennai, and kind of east and west, and also all the way up to the Himalayas, and an area that's kind of super popular for motorbikes there. Actually, the first time I rode a Royal Enfield Classic, basically the first time I was on a proper motorbike outside of a scooter, was in the Himalayas itself, which was a learning experience. Not quite as much traffic there to some extent, but still a little bit crazy. When I learned to ride a motorbike proper, I was based in Bangalore. And I was lucky enough to have a local who was an instructor. He brought me through, actually riding a bike and all the principles around that, but also how to navigate Bangalore traffic itself, which was quite busy, quite an experience. I don't know if for some of you who've been there, that first 10 minutes on your taxi from the airport to Bangalore, it just feels like you've been transported into a different dimension, speaking as a Westerner. But over time, you do adjust to it, and riding a motorbike there is a very unique experience. And I think there's misconceptions around, about how dangerous it is. It is dangerous. There's definitely a need for caution there. There's this idea that maybe it's out of control or wild. But really, there are a number of rules to riding there. They're just not the rules that you would expect. This video is not intended to mock any of that. India especially is something that I have, a culture that I've got a lot of respect for. But I did want to think that, I don't know if I want to give my perspective on what those rules are and how they apply in practice, to sort of demystify and encourage people to travel there. If you're a motorcyclist, to go there, I think it's a once in a lifetime. Do it once for sure. I would love to go back, and I hope to do it in the future. So the first rule is the shortest distance rule, and for me that means that when you're at a junction, especially in the city, a large junction, and if you're, in some cases within Bangalore, there might be a 12 entrance exit junction, which is quite hard to navigate in and of itself. Also, it's completely flowing traffic in 4 directions, doing the math, obviously more than that, but at any given time, and you have to get from an entrance on one side to an exit on the far end. Now, as a Westerner, you'll say, follow the rule of merging as traffic flows, waiting for opportunity, crossing into that lane, going across, coming back across traffic on the other end. Problem with that is, if you do that, you'll probably never get out, and you'll never get back in again. So it doesn't really apply. And as you're doing that, you're going to create a blockage for what is usually free-flowing traffic. Therefore, you are the hazard. Therefore, what you'll see the locals do is you'll see them undercutting traffic to take the shortest distance to that exit, which means that there might be another layer beyond the immediate flow that are only following that route specifically, all to that exit. So there's an aspect of following the crowd potentially there as well, which is another rule. But yeah, that's number one. Second, while you're riding, and I think this is, it's more applicable there, but what I call what I kind of termed it as the triangle of responsibility. You're responsible for a relatively small area in front of your bike, and that's it. As long as you are aware and in control and being able to navigate empty space in front of your motorcycle, obviously within very heavy traffic, you've got short distances to the bike in front, but if you can keep that under control and navigate your bike, continuing to keep a window and obstacles out of that window, you are safe. And in turn, if everybody's operating the same way, which they typically are in India, it kind of works that everybody maneuvers and avoids each other just by being solely responsible for that kind of front area of the bike. It's very near focused. It's not about looking ahead and all the things that are happening. That's overwhelming, and I think that's the difference, I think, between kind of a Western strategy and an Indian strategy there. As another, there's a right of way, which is kind of maybe a later rule, but there's right of way around size. So the size of the vehicle matters. If one thing to be wary of on the risk factors is large trucks. In India, they respect the momentum of a vehicle. So if you're small, you can stop quickly, you can navigate quickly, you can avoid pedestrians, those type of things. If you're large, if it's a very large truck, some of the trucks there are huge, made out of Tata trucks. They're just made out of one block of steel, basically. Is that they can't really stop, so they won't. They're not going to be navigating traffic in the same way. So motorcyclists and pedestrians, etc., will yield to them come what may. But from motorcyclists, scooters to pedestrians typically will have a form of right of way, and there's another rule that applies to that as well. So that's the third rule. The fourth is pedestrian movement, predictability over speed. If you're a pedestrian or you're watching other pedestrians, you'll note that they'll rather than wait for an opening, which there isn't any in a general flow of traffic in most scenarios, if there is, obviously use it, but typically there's not, is that you move predictably and slowly across the traffic. So you'll see people just walking directly into fairly busy, fairly hectic traffic, but they'll move at a predictable speed. And then other vehicles, other motorcyclist scooters, because of the triangle of responsibility, they'll note that person and they'll navigate around them, and they can navigate around them if they're moving predictably. If they're moving erratically, if they're moving too fast, it means that they can't take a predictable line and navigate that obstacle. Again, sounds a bit crazy, works quite well in practice, although there are some pedestrian accidents that I've certainly witnessed. But again, with the necessity of that, how busy it is, that's the only rule that really works. You've probably heard of within India using your horn, so that it's a communication system. For me, it's almost like sonar. In practice, when you're riding and you're tuned into it, you're using sound as much as you are using the visuals of what you can see, because it gives you perception of what's behind, and it gives you a suggestion based on what they're planning to do, as in, is the sound moving quickly towards you? Is it steady but bringing you awareness to it? A good use of a horn, and again, there's a bit of a system there, is that we'll use more extended presses for a bit of an emergency situation, double honk if they're overtaking, that type of thing, and you get used to those sounds, and other people tend to mimic the same. I can alternate it a little bit by city, for example. These things can be a little bit local as well, but overall you do get used to using the sound. So it's to signify, I'm passing you, I'm here, don't move into my path, be cautious, there's a blind area ahead that you can't see, that type of thing. But yeah, again, it definitely works. It makes it easier to see the three-dimensional nature of what's happening around you, which sounds crazy, but again, your brain adjusts. You have to expect the unexpected. Rule number 6. So you have to be aware of the unpredictable. You do see people who a lot of riders there seem quite casual, quite easygoing. You can't get angry because that breaks the system for yourself. So yeah, not that much road rage there unless somebody really acts out of the ordinary, which is good, obviously, otherwise it would be total chaos. But for you, being unexpected, kind of being relaxed but also completely tuned into the unexpected. Even with these rules in mind, things will happen that you don't expect, so you have to be ready to react to those things. For me, I suppose the one thing that I brought is using my mirrors more than I typically would, all the time, just checking positioning all the time, just getting aware of what might come next, almost to a point of paranoia, and that does help. Again, you'll not see typically the locals. Locals will typically, focus purely on that forward view. For me, I try to keep a balance of both, and that for me felt I did feel safer. The edge rule, so using the edge of the road as a buffer. So you'll see people using kind of edges and around the out and around potholes and so on. Again, especially if you're sharing the road with cars, using the buffer, using the basically off-road section that you'll find and so on, is fair game in the context of finding a way through or actually avoiding hazards and so on. You'll find they'll use areas that wouldn't necessarily be used outside of the road scenario, and it's okay for you to use that too, which kind of leads to things like following the group. Eye contact equals negotiation, rule number 8. So your eye contact can signify your intent. So as you get closer to people, you're close to people typically, especially if you're kind of in a face-to-face navigating a junction and so on. There's just this short exchange that you'll get of them not on either the puzzlement of them not sure what you're doing, which gives you an indicator that you should make that more clear, or a small reflection of allowance and giving way to you, that type of thing. There can be, because most people are open faced and so on, you've got that opportunity to navigate other people's facial gestures. It feels like a lot extra to do, but again, it can be a really useful tool. Speed is relative. Typically you aim to match the speed of surrounding traffic. You don't want to be the one too far ahead, you don't want to be the one left behind. Matching traffic regardless of how it feels at the time typically is safest and best. Typically within the city the speed is relatively slow anyway. Again, because so much is happening, it can feel fast at times, but matching speed is another safety technique. Assume no one can see you. You ride defensively and expect to be invisible, especially with cars. They might see you for sure, but also they might not necessarily care that they can see you. And again, as I've mentioned, the size rule, and being aware of trucks, large SUVs, things like that, they don't really have to give way to you. So kind of be extra cautious, move out of the way ahead of time, especially on highways, which is another ballgame altogether to some extent. You have to overtake decisively. Either overtake decisively or don't do it and wait for your opportunity. You will find, I think, as you get used to it, you'll probably overtake more than you usually would, because again, getting ahead is a good thing. And you might end up taking some risks in terms of ongoing, but typically ongoing will avoid, they'll not try to make problems for you. So there'll be a little bit of parting for you in the nature of you taking a relatively close overtake maneuver in some scenarios. But yeah, overtaking is kind of a necessity of the road. Again, using your horn, using those signals, squeezing the ratio a little bit of what is safe, it works. Lane discipline is flexible. You have to adapt to how fluid the lanes are. If lanes open up, if the group chooses a different route for everyone to go at any given time based on one leader's decision within traffic, you're better to follow that lead for the most part and see where it goes to some extent, and then we adapt based on what happens follows. That might lead you to kind of a bit of maybe a dead end or a log jam and things like that, but again, you reapply some of the previous rules to get yourself out of that scenario, but don't be kind of dead in the water in the context of traffic. Pack mentality, again, some of these previous rules alluded to this, but you move with the group. You'll find that it's almost like a living organism. Things flow, things move together, and you mostly fall into that flow as best as you can. That will take you forwards and not leave you kind of stranded in the context of that flow. Patience, so slow is steady, and steady is safe. When you're in congestion especially, just keep if you're using clutch, obviously a little bit more difficult. If you're on a scooter, a little bit easier. But maintaining very steady flow, having low speed maneuver control is really important. Lots of scenarios where that will come up. But you don't want to be stopping, jerky, starting, stopping. That makes you unpredictable to other people. Therefore, you're less safe. Learning the local nuances. I mentioned this already, but you are better to, some of these rules can change a little bit per location, per city, and things like that. So being aware of those kind of subtle changes, and maybe how sometimes it can also be the aggression or the laid back can change a little bit as well in terms of other drivers, and that applies, I guess, worldwide, but can be especially prominent maybe in some of the cities within India. But overall, like I say, this is not about creating a fear of doing this or the unknown. It's just being aware that there is things that you can actively do, skills that you can learn, observations you can make, that will allow you to step into this amazing place, amazing country. To travel there on a motorbike is just fantastic, and there's so many places to go. It opens up so much for you as motorcycle travel does in general, and I would highly recommend traveling. And I think on another video maybe I'll talk about some specific areas I might visit, but like I say, hopefully that's helpful. Either as maybe you're an expat in India, maybe you plan to go there in the future, and this is one of those things that maybe plays on your mind based on other videos that you've seen. But yeah, I think that like I say, these are some of my observations kind of paraphrased, so hopefully they're helpful. Thanks for watching. Take care.